Good evening, everybody. How are you guys doing? I will officially start. Let's just give 2 more minutes at 7:02, and then I will start my brief for this evening session. Okay. All right. Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. And continue. Okay. So bearing in mind, this is the first session for all of you from the MMD. So a couple of briefing from me. It's quite straightforward. It's all in your email, but let me just reiterate a couple of points. Okay, just hang in there. We're at about 44 students, 43 students. I think almost everybody is here. Let's just wait 1 more minute. Hang in there with me. Okay, guys, thank you. Okay, 7:03. Let's just start. Okay. Once and foremost, again, everybody, welcome and good evening to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's been one of those days. I had 7 meetings today. It's amazing. Okay, but we're here, and I think very importantly, the speaker is here, and all of you are here. A couple of ground rules because this is the first one for the MMDs. Okay, so please, as much as possible, try to keep your camera on. It's nice that the speaker can put a face to your name. Okay. During the session, if you have any questions, you may want to put them in the chat group. Okay, and then we can relook that and we can ask the speaker the questions later at the end. Okay. All right, so enjoy the session. I'm going to pass this now to Ian, our Alumni manager, to introduce the speaker. Thank you, Ian. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Will. Good evening, ESSEC students. This evening, we are very privileged to have our own ESSEC alumna, Angela, to be our speaker for the session. She is currently the APAC Markets, Intelligence, and Consumer Insights Lead for PUTS. Should you have any questions for our guest speaker, please do not hesitate to type them in the chat function of this Zoom session, and we'll try our best to answer them during the Q&A session that will happen after the alumni speaker's presentation. Now, without further ado, I shall now pass the mic over to Angela. Angela, please.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for the introduction, and hi, everyone who's made it to this session. So yes, my name is Angela. I'm going to introduce myself in a little bit, but for now, I wanted to introduce my presentation. So what I'm going to walk you through is the industry I'm currently working in. So it's all about beauty and luxury beauty for that. So, okay, we're going to introduce you to the resilient beauty industry, especially through the Asia lens, that it's obviously where I am working at today. So let me see. Okay, so as I mentioned, I will walk you through a little bit about me, then a little bit about the industry in general, referring to beauty, and then about my role within the industry and what I'm doing today. I think it can bring a little bit of light into your program as well. I have I'm an alumni from the ESSEC MBA in Paris, but I've been really close to the Singapore campus since I moved here, just to show how strong our ties are once we are an alumni of the school. So a little bit about me first. Well, my name is Angela. I'm from Colombia, so in South America, for those of you who have never heard of this country. I've had the privilege of learning different languages across, the different countries I've lived in. So I'm also, well, my native language is Spanish, but I also speak French and English. I like to think of myself as a geography switcher. I was very, very lucky to, have international experience from an early stage. I lived in Colombia until I was, I think, 26. I had a career there. I was working and I was, growing in an industry that was completely different from the industry I am in today. And the truth is that because of my passion for the luxury beauty industry, I decided to join ESSEC Business School in 2015 to make sure I had a program that was focused in luxury, that was around everything that I wanted to transform my career into. And I was very, very lucky during that year of the MBA. It was not only a moment in time where I met amazing colleagues, amazing friends that I still talk to from all over the world, but also it was an amazing moment for me as a Colombian girl who had never heard about many, many brands or many, many parts of this industry, to learn a lot. It was just like a sponge of a learning experience. During that time, we were able to travel to Hong Kong, Dubai, to Switzerland, Italy, and we were very lucky to see the different sides of the luxury industry and how it translates depending on the consumer that it's relating to that. So it was a fantastic experience. And again, I'm really, really grateful for the ESSEC MBA. I also met my husband during my MBA. He's French and now living here in Singapore with me, of course. So after my MBA in France and after, that experience, I really, really wanted to stay in France. It opened my eyes to the world of possibility. Colombia is always going to be a market that belongs to a region, probably South America, that ultimately reports into another region, and eventually we reach headquarters. In France, there are so many brands and so many groups that are headquartered there. And I was super, super lucky to find a job there. I worked there for 3.5 years. And then because of my husband's job, we decided to move to Singapore. And I was super lucky again because I found Puig, my new family and my new company where I've been working for the past 2.5 years. So overall, I have about 10 plus years experience. I started working really young. And during this time, during all these years, although I have changed industries, although I have stopped and went for a 1-year program abroad, I have only been able to continue building on my skill set. So that's something I really wanted to share with you because I think it's something that sometimes we're scared of when we just quit our jobs or just leave our hometown and go somewhere else to, study or just stop our lives in a way. It's so worth it. And I don't regret that for 1 minute. So during my years of experience, I've kind of built upon my experience in pricing strategy. I've worked in pricing ever since my first job. I really love it. And it's very linked to finance. So all my experience is much revolving around data and around analytics. But I'm not really into kind of being just the girl behind the Excel spreadsheet. I want to make sure that the data that I'm sharing within the organization is going to be able to lead to, making decisions and having a business impact at the end. So pricing is a really, really good, let's say, department to do that. I've worked in finance. All my 3 years in France were in finance, and back in Colombia, I was in finance as well before moving to marketing. I have learned how to negotiate with different suppliers, whether I am the client or they are my clients. And all of that together came about to be what I am today, which is a consumer insights and markets intelligence lead for Asia Pacific in Puig. So where I have both markets and business strategy like that leg, and then consumer insights, which is somehow new to me, or it was when I started. But it's really, really interesting. And it's really what, I mean, it motivates me a lot. It's the industry I love. So you will hear me talking very passionately about what I do because I really love it. And then the last thing that I wanted to share is that, you shouldn't be scared of changing industries or, kind of pivoting in your career, because this is the time to kind of learn what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So I was working in automotive industry in Colombia, working at General Motors. And again, after 6 years, I understood this was not the industry for me. And I moved to luxury beauty after my MBA. And I was super lucky, as I mentioned before, to join first the Estee Lauder family through the Kilian brand. And for those of you who have never heard about this brand, I really encourage you to get to know it. It's a beautiful niche fragrance brand. It's quite expensive, but it's because it's so handcrafted, and there's a lot of savoir-faire around it. You can see it in Essentials here in Singapore if you ever want to take a look at it. And then after I joined Puig. So a new beauty family, but always in beauty, and I intend to remain in beauty. So one of the things that I really wanted to share with you as well was that during my time in ESSEC, I still remember, and up until today, it's been almost 6 years after I started. And there was 3 things about the luxury industry and the very first class I had that remained true and remain true today in my everyday work. So one of the things that we first learned was how luxury can be democratized and should be democratized. But the key ingredient here is that understanding that luxury will be relative to the person who is considering that luxury item to be luxury or not. Because something that extraordinary people may have, or may see as ordinary, will be extraordinary for ordinary people. So again, this is that key word, let's say, or key phrase that really made me understand why I wanted to be in luxury beauty. And this is kind of the segue into luxury once you start understanding the brand portfolios, etc. There's another thing that I think is key for you guys who want to indeed work in luxury, and is the fact that there's always going to be a paradox between having business and remaining with that brand image of exclusivity. So we still want to make sure that everyone is buying it, but we want people to feel that they're one of the few who can actually get this type of product. So it's always a paradox between image and business, and exclusivity versus accessibility. This remains true still today. And I'm sure when you guys start working in some of these companies, if you start a career in luxury, you will see this in your day-to-day life, regardless of the position you are in. And then the last thing that, again, is on my job every single day is the brand DNA and codes. The DNA of the brand is like our DNA. It doesn't change. It is what it is. A brand is one. But then we can play with the codes to make sure that our brand resonates on the different markets we play it with. So I will tell you a little bit more of how I apply these 3 things into my day-to-day job. And then you can definitely see that, all the classes, because it did happen to me that sometimes I was sitting down in the classroom and I'm like, oh my God, this is so theoretical. But to be honest, it isn't. I feel it and I see it every single day in my real day-to-day job. So to give an example of DNA and brand codes, this is Kilian. So the brand I was talking to you about, the brand I worked for in Paris for 3.5 years. And if you just see this brand like this, if you just see the picture in the right, you may think, is it a fragrance brand, or is it actually a liquor brand, or like, why is there a bar there? Or actually, the creator of this brand, Kilian Hennessy, he is the grandson of the Hennessy family. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Hennessy, the cognac. And because of that heritage and because of his family history, the DNA of the brand revolves around that culture of liquor and that culture of alcohol. So the brand appropriated that. That's what made it different from anywhere else in the world, any other brand in the world. And they have staged their visual merchandising and everything to look like a bar. They work with cocktail barmen to create cocktails for each of their fragrances. And this is a way where you can really understand, you immediately see this picture, you immediately understand it's Kilian. It's their DNA. So in the left, you have like a picture of their store, their pop-up store in Shanghai last year, I believe, or earlier this year. And you can see as well that they play not only with those codes of bar and liquor and all of that, but also with the Art Deco and the, kind of 20s look. So again, those are codes that the brand is using to express their DNA. So now I moved from Kilian in Paris and the glamour of the brand and the Art Deco to join Puig. So I know most of you or some of you may not have heard of this group. It is not one of the big groups such as the L'Oréal, Estée Lauder that everyone has heard of, but Puig is a challenger in the beauty industry. And Puig is there to create beauty and fashion love brands, and love brands translate to luxury brands. So if you see to the right, you can see that Puig in the world last year, and this is their public information, you can find it in their website, Asia represented 9% of their total revenue last year. So when you look at that, you're like, oh my God, but Asia is so tiny in their reality. And indeed it was and is, let's say, depends on the lens through which you look at it. So that's why I wanted to share that although this is their reality from 2020 closing, and it's 9% of Asia, we have a role to play in Asia, that it's really changing the outlook of what this group can be in the short term. And that is where I find my job to be extremely rewarding and extremely interesting for me even, because we're helping the journey of this group in their worldwide results. So I'll explain you how and why with a little bit of background on what I do. So first, for those of you who had never heard of Puig before, these are the brands that we have under the portfolio of beauty and fashion. So we currently have the license of Comme des Garçons and Christian Louboutin, but we have as well the perfumers brands, which are niche fragrance brands, Penhaligon's and L'Artisan Parfumeur. L'Artisan is not sold, unfortunately, in Singapore, but Penhaligon's, you can see their boutiques as well in Ion, or you can go to Essentials because they're there as well. And you have Dries Van Noten, which is a Belgian brand. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful brand. And hopefully if you ever hear about it, you will fall in love with it. Then you have your prestige brands. So what we call prestige is because they are broader in their, let's say, presence worldwide, and they are blockbusters worldwide, except in Asia. So Carolina Herrera, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Nina Ricci, Paco Rabanne, and recently Charlotte Tilbury, which was just purchased by the group. Then you have our lifestyle brands, which are not really considered in the luxury scheme, and they don't really play in Asia, but they are really strong brands in the Western world. So now that you've, kind of familiarized yourselves a little bit better with the company, I wanted to share about my role. So what does a consumer markets intelligence person do, and what is it, that I do on a day-to-day to help the group in their objective to become one of the biggest luxury beauty groups in the world? So actually, for context, when you look at it, this is data from the luxury beauty industry. It's what they call selective beauty in Euromonitor. So Euromonitor is a panel that we use that has kind of estimations of what the market size worldwide looks like. When you look at that, if you look to your bottom left-hand side, you can see that Asia was the only one market that in 2020 closing was growing, still with a positive CAGR of the past 4 years, while the rest of the world was badly hit because of COVID. And then when you look at the right, you see that in terms of market size and the projection of the market by 2023 and 2025, the biggest markets in selective beauty are expected to be Asia and travel retail. And when you consider that within travel retail, the main consumer is actually the Chinese traveling consumer that right now is not really traveling abroad, but staying in domestic, then you understand that the brands and the groups that are very successful are successful because they have been speaking to that consumer with the right portfolio, with the right pricing and the right approach from the very start. And we are just starting. So we have a world of possibilities ahead of us. When you look at same data, but shown differently, when you see in the left-hand side, the key players in beauty, you realize that, for example, Estee Lauder, 48% of their sales are on skincare, and L'Oreal, 49% of their sales are on skincare. If you look at Puig, 98% of our market is on fragrance. And that is the one reason why we have never conquered Asia before. That's why Asia is 9%, because Asia is a market driven by skincare, and it's a market driven by color, and lastly by fragrance. So that's what's so interesting. We're finally having a portfolio of brands that can play in makeup and brands that can play in skincare. And it gives us a world of possibilities to become more successful in this part of the world. So all of this is data from Euromonitor. If any of you have access to it, just take advantage of the data that's there, because it's really, really interesting. So in my role, I have kind of three hats today. One of those hats is internal and external marketing analytics. And for that, I use panel data, I use internal sellout data, I use performance data from each of our brands in these markets across Asia Pacific to understand what is performing well and why. Because it's not only about saying, okay, number one brand is Louboutin, but why? Why do people like us? Is it the right price? Do we have the right assortment, or we don't? And all those why questions are the ones that ultimately are very interesting for the group to get to know those answers through data, to back everything up through data. So that's where I play. So these data can help, for example, for market entry strategies. So we work with brands ahead of their entry into Asia to understand how they can come into the market and be successful. And we do a lot of competitive benchmarking. So for example, let's say some of you guys may love to be in Sephora, and maybe you go to Sephora and then you see that in the makeup aisle, you have Chanel, you have Dior, you have YSL. And let's say you have a brand that you want to compete with them. So you need to understand, what are they doing really well? What is their key leverage to work so good, so that you can really help your brand design the right strategy to go into that retail space and be successful. So that's where that kind of hat plays at. Then you have a second hat that is pricing. So in this, in my path, as I told you before, I've worked in pricing for a very, very long time. What I really like about it is that it's strategic, in the sense that I'm not looking at, okay, should I be pricing this at 100 euros or 200 euros because my gross margin needs to be, 60%. So actually, it's not just that. I need to understand, what are the competitors doing? How much are they pricing their products at? What is the difference of the product in China versus the product in home market or France, for example? But also, if the Chinese consumer will travel to Hong Kong, like out of the mainland and into Greater China, or if they travel to Australia, or if they go to Russia, we need to understand what ultimately they will be paying for the same product, and try to optimize that journey so that we maximize our profits, but we also maximize the consumer experience, and that they don't find that actually in China they're paying 50% higher that they would have paid had they been abroad. So again, it's very, very analytical, but very interesting in the sense that it's not just, one step done, next. No, you have to keep feeding it, and you have to do lots of benchmarking and gather lots of data. Fortunately, I'm not just doing this by myself. Like, the markets will help me with their markets intelligence, so that I can do the analysis and provide proposals on the right pricing. And then there's a third hat, which is mostly about consumer insights. And within consumer insights, we're working really hard in creating a culture of social listening. So I know that part of your program also has, a mix of luxury and digital, right? So this part of social listening is something that I think can be useful for you guys, for those of you who have not heard of it or not used it yet. It's really a tool that it's helping many brands act much quicker and, get to know their consumers in a faster way than, through quality or quantity research. But we do that as well, of course. And then in my role, we don't just have what we call local markets. We also have travel retail. So that's the one exception, and it's very particular for this organization in Puig, that travel retail and local market Asia are in the same division. And the reason of that is that, as I mentioned before, travel retail in Asia, at least 90% of travel retail in Asia is driven by the Chinese consumer. So when we say local market and travel retail, we mean the Chinese consumer and the rest of Asia markets. And then within Asia, also just to highlight, I'm going to talk a lot about China here, just because it's the key driver of, post-COVID world. But within Asia, we also target a lot, trying to explain to the brands, to the markets, and to the regional teams the differences within Asia, because there are different sides of it, right? So if you go, in our case, India is under our scope. In some groups, it's not the case. But when you talk about India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and their affinity to fragrance is completely different from when you check the affinity of fragrance of Singapore or Japan, Korea, and China, what we call North Asia. So each of the countries has their own specificity, has their own mix, has their own expectations. The consumers are not the same, and that's what makes it really, really interesting, that it's not just one market. It's a region that it's several regions, like several sides of the same market of the beauty industry. So some markets will be more skincare driven, some others will be more makeup, some others will be more fragrance. So we have to balance all of that. So again, I'm not doing this just by myself. We definitely need the support of external agencies. I still remember a lot one of the alumni meetings that we had when I was a student back in 2015. And one of the key questions that I always had was like, how do I keep up to date? How do I know what's happening, that so when I'm not in the classroom anymore, I am still able to learn and understand what's happening out there? And to do that, and I was very thankful to that alumni at that point in time, he gave me a list of the sources of information he joined, and like the newsletters he had in every week in his email. I'm not sure if all of you have email, but for those of you who do, having all of those subscriptions is super, super, super relevant. You learn a lot. And not only that, but like LinkedIn as a platform, you can follow tons of people that just share their knowledge for free, and that you can connect with them and just follow them and see what's happening in the world of, of Asia in whatever industry you want. You can really, really learn a lot from what is being shared there. So I like to make connections. I have reached out to many people on LinkedIn just saying, hey, I want to know more about your industry, or I want to know more about, your Chinese consumer and your point of view about them. So can you share? And people usually do share. So it's very interesting. So among all of those contacts that we've created, of course, we have to the left the panel data that we buy. So Euromonitor, beauty research, generation research, those are more like data sets that we can analyze. Then we also have free resources in a way that are consultancy companies that are, providing knowledge to the companies, such as Deloitte or BCG. Even being a company, they publish a lot of things that are super, super relevant for the luxury industry. And we have then tons of other partners that are always creating knowledge for us that, you know, we hire whenever we need a specific project to be happening. We have influence management tools, we have social listening tools. So this is just to highlight that, you know, even though people in the industry can say, yes, we're experts in consumer or we're experts in data or whatever, we usually have a partner that's going to help us and that's going to translate all that data into actionable insights with your guidance. So it's not just you doing behind a screen, because at the end of the day, there's a point in time where you also want to, you know, grow and be there thinking and strategizing, not just doing. And this is why they're there. So actually this year we had a great opportunity to join a digital luxury summit that was held in Shanghai. Obviously I couldn't go, but we were there online. And I wanted to share some of the extracts that Deloitte shared with us. So they had, again, this let's say speaker talking about the outlooks of the China market performance for luxury towards 2025. And when you see the share of the top luxury brands here, you see that they have grouped them into, you know, the groups, the big luxury groups. So you have your LVMH, Richemont, Kering, and you have the shares that they're expecting for closing 2020. And where they are expecting the personal luxury goods market to be at by 25. So you can see they are expecting a growth of 22%, which is huge and driven again by China, right? It's all about China. So one of the reasons that China is so interesting for anyone working in insights and then data analytics, it's because of the journey that the digital landscape in that market has, you know, provided to all consumers there. So it is no longer, and this is Deloitte who had shared, it's no longer, you know, you cannot talk about just a linear consumer journey. There are so many touch points and so many like routes that same consumer can take. So, you know, all of these touch points, they play with one another. And at the end, we're able to kind of convert them into three different things: either a purely online channel driven journey, or a purely offline channel driven journey, or an omni-channel journey. In general, it's going to be a lot more omni-channel than online only or offline only. So we Western mindsets, I usually talk about omni-channel, and the company we talk omni-channel. If you go to your China news or whatever, they call it new retail, but it's the same thing. The same thing, different word. The most important thing about it is that when you realize that this market is so different from the Western world, and it's so different in terms of touch points, in terms of consumer journey, in terms of consumer expectations, that's when it becomes super relevant to have someone in the team who is able to explain this to the headquarters team. Because again, what happens is that in headquarters, you may have several brands or teams that have either never been in China or never really understood the market, never needed to understand the market. Therefore, they know how to do things in the Western world and they do it super well, but they would not understand why we need, you know, a certain cropping of assets so that we can put them in Tmall, and a certain different asset to put them in, you know, a 3D screen, because maybe they were not used to having, you know, those requests before. So all of the data that we gather, all of the information we have on consumer, we all not only, you know, keep it for us and have KPIs and, you know, track our performance, but also to teach and upskill the brands that need to be more ready for their journey in Asia. And their journey in Asia will start better when they have learned and understood China. So again, this is just an extract of what they were sharing, but even for the big brands, luxury established brands, you see that platforms such as Little Red Book and Douyin in China are becoming super relevant, where before it was maybe something that the brands would have said never, like I will never be on those channels. This is not for me. But right now, because of the market is making them consider being more flexible and adapting to the reality. If they want to play and they want to be successful, they have to adapt and localize certain things. So this is an extract. So that was an extract of what Deloitte was sharing. Now this is an extract of like my presentations that I do very often and that are shared within the company for the top management in headquarters. So it's data, but then it's how you make the data work for you and tell the story you want to tell. So in this kind of slide, what we're trying to explain to headquarters is saying, hey, if you look at the worldwide performance, you see there was a drop in 2020 versus 2019. If you look at China, this was not the case. We actually grew in 2020, 22% in skincare, flat in color, and 13% in fragrance. This is one market where that happened. The rest of the markets, you cannot see that. And then we're also explaining, you know, their outlook is that by 2026, the market is still going to be more relevant around skincare. So if in our portfolio, we have absolutely no skincare, how can we win against the L'Oreal or Estée? We cannot, because we will need that kind of product to be able to play in that kind of market. So it's very strategic conversations that ultimately open the eyes to the decision makers. And this is why, you know, I really enjoy what I do, because I think that every single slide, every single Excel is ultimately leading to a decision that's going to help the group. So again, we usually use data from Euromonitor, but also external data from, you know, publications that are done abroad, seminars that have been shared with us, and we merge all of that together to explain why we need certain things happening specifically for this market. So we will also say, hey, actually the outlook by 25 is that e-commerce is going to weigh 3 times what it's weighing today. So it's going to be more than 50% penetration. And look at how the online penetration has grown for segments such as makeup and fragrance. So we need to be more online. And I guess COVID helped us all accelerate on that sense. But now when you talk about Amazon in the Western world, people are not scared of it anymore because they have understood that it's something, a marketplace, they need to be there. If you talk about Tmall, okay, lots of more people are understanding it. But then if you go JD, or you say VIP, or you say Koala, or you say Bonnie and Clyde, or you mention any other retailer that it's China specific, it's lost in translation. So I think that's one of the biggest advantages of having enrolled in a program in Asia and being here, that you can learn how to use the tools, that you can, you know, understand what the landscape looks like, because you're going to meet a lot of people, friends, or classmates that are, you know, from mainland China or from Greater China that can teach you all of this. And it's so interesting. Like really, it's one of the most enriching things that I've learned in my time here. And I love having local colleagues who teach me all the time, because, you know, I don't speak Mandarin, but I'm still, you know, listening and working with social listening tools in Mandarin the whole day. So I need them to teach me and help me out through this journey. And I think that's something that it's the one place you can have that is here. So when we talk about that different landscape, right? And we talk about, and I was mentioning social listening, when you see, and this is just a snapshot as of like probably a month ago, of when you see the platforms that play within the China landscape, you have so many. When you talk in the Western world, they're usually going to mention 4 or 5, right? We're going to go Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. We're going to go with Twitch maybe, and TikTok. So 5. How many do we have here, right? So we don't only have content platforms, but we also have all the travel retail platforms and where everyone is booking their flights. There's also touch points there to explore. The e-commerce platforms that actually also social commerce in that way. If you have your Tmall own store, you can also have followers, have members, have loyalty program that works there, communicate with your consumers, do live streaming. So it's a lot more than the Western platforms. So this is why I think spending some time understanding all of this is super, super, super important. Even for things in pricing, for example, I mentioned I do pricing. So Jessica's Secret as a platform for the travelers when they can see, and if you guys want to know, you can put a product there, search for a product, and they will tell you what the price of that product is in any travel retail door worldwide. So you can learn if you, I don't know, maybe you're a fan of fragrance, let's say a competitor brand, Byredo. You want to buy Mojave Ghost from Byredo, so you want to check where you can buy the cheapest. This app is going to tell you where. So it's very, very interesting. And again, this changes a lot every time there's a new platform or something that was added or removed. It evolves so quickly. So the best thing, and that's why I love LinkedIn right now, everyone is becoming a teacher for me on that sense, and we grasp information. We need to move fast with this market. So to do that fast movement, we have a social listening tool put into place. I launched this in 2019. We did the very first one, and ever since we've kind of evolved, and it's become my, let's say, project. And we track most of the platforms that are relevant. So we track WeChat, Weibo, Red, e-commerce side, JD, Taobao, Tmall. We track video sites such as Bilibili, Qiyi, Douyin. And with that, what we're trying to understand is, out of a pool of brands that we have selected, we want to understand how netizens, or the people talking online, we call them netizens, how are they communicating about my brand, what they like, what they don't like. If I communicated that I have a celebrity, did it create more awareness or not? What's my share of voice? This is just an example of the things we can do with social listening. So we wanted to understand and share with the brand teams of the product development in Paris. We're explaining, actually, we need to have this or that ingredient in our fragrances. And they will say, but why? So this is actually a map kind of combining the conversations of the netizens in the past 6 months. This is real data. So if you go to the left, you can see the makeup one, right? So for lips, people are looking for transfer proof, for a subtle shine. They want them to be natural looking. They want to have, rose, peach, the lip mud, which is a new texture that is being brought up by C brands in China. So it's something that probably our brands are not going to know. So we need to bring that to their attention. We can see that, there was a trending topic, which was like the innocent, sexy look at the time. I love how netizens speak. The literal translations of how they speak, it's just, I love it. But the innocent, sexy look. So you need to have a lip product, an eye product, and blush to create that look. And then again, you can understand how they talk and ride the wave of that conversation. So your brand can eventually say, hi, I have the innocent, sexy look. You could try this and this and this product from my brand. And it makes sense because you're speaking the language of the netizens. Then in the right side, you have an example for fragrance. So we divide our brands, as I mentioned before, in niche, prestige, and lifestyle. So for niche brands, you can see that netizens are talking about Maison Margiela, Atelier Cologne, MFK, Acqua di Parma. So those are the brands that they are linking to niche. When I say prestige, what they are linking is, for example, YSL, Lancôme, Bulgari. So there are different universes, and it's really, really focused. You can really see that someone who will buy a Frederic Malle perfume is not the same someone who's talking about Bulgari perfume. And this also helps us, again, tell the brands the story, because in the Western world, it may happen that they tell you, well, Bulgari is the main competitor of this niche brand. And you're like, no, it is not the case in Asia. And these data helps you prove that, right? So what kind of data we also see in that kind of trends? So we see what are the usage occasions. So normally in a context without social listening, we would have probably done a quali or a quanti study, gather a focus group and ask them the in-depth interviews, like, why do you use this fragrance, or just ask the questions in a questionnaire. Here, through social listening, we're gathering 98,000 mentions related to occasions of fragrance usage in China by the netizens, only on the conversations they're openly posting online. And we understand that they're actually using it more when they go to work and when they go to a party. Not really to stay at home, not really for a date. It differs largely from what we see in the Western world. And then it helps us to provide answers and check how this changes in a quarterly basis, in a monthly basis, however we want to, because the data is already being captured through the machine learning algorithm. Then we also have ingredients. It helps a lot the product development teams, but also the BAs in the store, because the BA in the store, once they have a customer, and this is useful also, for example, for, let's say, California in the US, there's a lot of places like San Francisco, there's a lot of Chinese American living there, in Canada. And they can, if they have a customer that approaches their store, they can still understand what kind of scents are trending and what kind of scents they're interested in. And we can, move our speech for the BAs and prepare the BAs so that they can push the right product for the customer, right? That is going to fit best with their expectations. We're not only looking at trends, we're also looking at our performance in terms of share of voice and net sentiment. So this is a little bit crowded, this slide, but basically what we try to see is, okay, where do I brand? Where are my brands in terms of buzz volume versus my net sentiment? Net sentiment, the highest it is, it means they love me more. And maybe you see a Jo Malone, which is super, super performing brand in Asia. It has a lot of volume and it has a quite good NSR. You have a brand such as Carolina Herrera, which is a Puig brand that is not really known in Asia yet, so that we have very, very little volume. But whoever has bought the brand ever likes it. So at least it gives us some idea of where we stand versus the competition, and it helps us track that if there are any changes. We can also check what is the profile of the netizens who follow our brands or who talk about our brands online. So example of Carolina Herrera, there's very, very, very few mentions. You can see here only 261, nothing. But out of those, we understand that the people who talk about it are interested in fashion. These are the celebrities they kind of follow, the topics of conversation they have. Most of them are women living in tier 1, tier 2 cities and aged between 18 to 35. And again, we can see how this evolves and how this compares with other brands because the information is there for us to grab. We can check, for competitor brands, for example, and we do this every month to check, oh, okay, what were the topics of conversation about a certain brand in a certain point in time? Are they talking about a new launch? Are they talking about a new celebrity that the brand is collaborating with? Hermes, they just launched their beauty line. So are people interested in it? What kind of shade are people buying? Same for, fragrance brands that are, super well known in the niche industry. So here you have just some of the examples. We can also do and utilize panel data. And this panel actually works for any of you who are ever interested. You can purchase things, then you scan them when you reach home. And in China, there's this panel, 40,000 people, where people do this. They buy and they put, in a system, I bought it for a friend or I bought it for myself. This is the brand, this is the price, etc. And with that, we can understand how many units per year on average people are buying, how many times do they go to buy, what are the brands they're buying. So we can learn a lot. We also do, classic consumer insight analytics. So for example, a quantitative study with questions where we can understand with quanti data how one product performs versus another. So this is a real example where we're seeing, okay, a lot of people use lipstick, right? A lot less people use concealer and eyebrow pencil or a lip liner. So if there's a brand that is developing a product to come into the market, what product would you recommend they go in with first? Well, it depends on the brand strategy, of course. But first thing that will pop to mind is go with lipstick, because, you know, it's what people use the most. Again, it will be the most competitive part, but it's a reason and there's data to back it up. We understand as well the differences in time and products that people are using to make their makeup. So for example, for a daily routine, it takes about 16 minutes. For a special occasion, it takes about 22 minutes. And in the daily routine, they really, you know, they first apply it at home, then they're in the office, they reapply lipstick. 54% of people reapply lipstick. In a special occasion, 60% of people reapply lipstick. So again, lipstick needs to be in the bag of people. You need to be able to carry it around, because if they're going to reapply, 60% of the people are going to reapply. Maybe your format and your sizing needs to fit in a clutch, or needs to fit in your wallet, or somewhere you can take it with you. So again, these are key insights with data to share with the brand teams. We can understand as well, you know, the different channels where people buy. So let's say, for example, people who buy in Tmall or Daigou, they wanna, or people who buy through Daigou, it's because they want agile, they wanna buy, they saw it, they know they want it, they get it. People who go to a department store, they're more product focused. So they're looking for a certain thing. They want to probably talk to the VA. You know, people who go to a pop-up store, they're looking for the experience in the pop-up store. And again, this helps us share with the brands. Example, we need a pop-up store and we need a certain experience in that pop-up store because these are the expectations of the consumer. So this is just an extract of what we had done this year about what we learned. And we did learn, and again, it was super confirmed that omnichannel was so relevant for the Chinese market. We shared this internally with all the brands, with all the market teams, all the regional teams. And again, this is about upskilling, but also making decisions that are right for this market. One of the questions that was also asked during that Q&A was about the consumer journey, right? We've talked about it a little bit in this session, and that consumer journey is highly affected by different touch points, right? So we have identified the touch points, but also identified, you know, how relevant it is to have great word of mouth and like reviews online, how important they are. So why we need to do so much seeding and send to so many KOLs and KOCs our products so that they leave reviews. And all of this is measured, and it's data behind it. There was 700 people who replied to this questionnaire. So all of this data is available. At the end of the day, what do we do with that data? We really want to have that omni-channel view of the consumer for Puig. And what we do with that data, ultimately, I'm just showing here an example, is every kind of consumer, every persona that you have, you know, maybe you have a beauty addict, maybe you have another one that's like the gifter or whatever. Each of them have a path and key touch points that influence their purchase journey. And what we do is really liaise with the brands and make them understand, like, okay, if this consumer is going to be your target audience and they're going to have all of this pathway, you need to make sure you have developed assets for each one of these touch points. That if they go online, they find you there. That if they go offline, they find you there. That if they go to an influencer, your brand is talked about. You need these assets, you need these presence, you need these touch points. And this is really a new way of seeing things, because brands are usually like, okay, I developed my banners and I developed my images for my campaign offline, blah, blah, blah. But there are market specificities. There are touch points that are unique to China or unique to India or unique to Malaysia that ultimately are going to bring that path to a localized kind of way of working, okay? So that was just to show you a little bit of how we do. And ultimately, all of that will also communicate with all of the other data sets that we have. So whether it's in the Western world with Google Analytics, with our PR agencies, with, you know, the data shared by the platforms themselves, or, you know, our social intelligence and social listening tools, all of that ultimately will speak together to create those paths and make the brands, you know, be more successful targeting the right audience. this was just to show you, and I'm just gonna be finishing soon, but this is just to show you an example of what pricing looks like in terms of strategy. I know I mentioned it before, but every one of our brands is gonna have a different competitive set depending on the place they play at. So maybe a Charlotte Tilbury is playing against Lancôme, for example, in makeup. But Juan Carolina Herrera is playing with Tom Ford. So you immediately expect the price point to be closer to Tom Ford and further away from Charlotte Tilbury. All of these strategic decisions are made in headquarters and are, let's say, shared with all of us markets and regions to make sure that we apply the same strategy. So when it comes to me, what I'm going to try to do is make sure that this strategy remains the same across markets. But what can happen is that, let's say I'm going to enter into Malaysia market, and it turns out that in Malaysia, Tom Ford is actually priced super high, is at the level of Hermes. So I need to take a decision and say, okay, do I want Carolina Herrera to enter this market at the price point of Hermes, or do I want to play with Armani? What is going to be the winning strategy for this brand in this market? So again, these are very, very strategic questions. And this is why I really, really like what I do. This is what the output will look like at the end, where we'll understand where the competitors are at. So we understood, for example, that in fragrances, I think this is an example from 2019. In China, fragrances are 24% higher in price than in France. So if you do go to France, now there's VTL. You can go buy your fragrance in France. For sure, it's going to be cheaper than in Singapore or in China or Korea or any other Asian markets. So yeah, that's my role. That's my journey. I hope that you enjoyed it. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you very much for the very detailed presentation, Angela. I think I'd like to actually start off the Q&A session with some questions of my own first. I'd like to actually ask the first question being, in your career, who do you look up to for inspiration or mentorship?
Okay. Well, I would say also I was very lucky when I joined Kilian. The team was very, very, very small. And I worked hand in hand with the general manager and like the president of the brand worldwide. Her name is Fleur de Robert, and she's a French woman, amazing human being, incredible boss, incredible mother. She is really my role model, 100%. And that's the kind of boss I would like to be. That's the kind of knowledge I would like to have. And she really taught me something that I think is very useful in my career nowadays. She told me career is not just a ladder. It is like a jungle gym. It means that you get to play in every single one of the, the different playgrounds that you have, even if it's horizontally and not vertically, because everything is going to teach you something, and then you're going to evolve. And I think sometimes we're very keen towards, climbing. I did an MBA, I did a master, but then there are certain things that you need to learn first, and that's going to bring you a new skill set. And I think that's what I really loved about her. She was very, very honest about it. Also, she's on LinkedIn, so if you want to follow her, she's always sharing knowledge. So yeah, that would be her.
Thank you, Angela. I think this leads on to my next question as well, is what do you think are the most important attributes of successful marketing leaders today?
I would think first and foremost is communication, upwards, downwards, sideways, in the sense that a good marketer will never work alone. As I mentioned before, even though you might be the best branding person in the world, if you're not listening to, the data that is being shared with you, or, the ambitions of the organization and where they want to play and go, you're going to be very frustrated, because at the end of the day, you need to work in teams. So you cannot be a marketer on your own, and you need to listen to your peers, to your teams, to your bosses, to your organization. I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. I think that the next question I have is, in your presentation, you showed a lot of sources of information that you use in your job on a daily basis. What do you think would be really the top 3 sources of information that you recommend that our students use?
I would say first thing and very easy, Jing Daily. They have a newsletter. It's in your email every single day. It's not only about China, but also about Asia and the Western world. And they have something really cool. I think it's once a week or something like this. They have like a Jing content daily. So they share like collaborations that brands have done, what netizens' reactions were, good or bad, consumer insights. They share. It's a great source of information. So that would be the first. I think the second one, which was not there, but I think it's very useful, especially if you're going to work in the Western world, is Business of Fashion. Business of Fashion is really good. Great source of knowledge for both fashion and beauty, not just beauty. And I think a third one that is kind of getting more traction and becoming more and more interesting is Vogue Business. Vogue, part of Condé Nast and everything, they do a lot of webinars. They are doing a lot of efforts to upskill companies, to measure performance of fashion beauty brands, and they share all that content for free. So definitely it's very good to follow them.
Thank you, Angela. So now I'll actually move on to the questions that we have from our students that I see in the chat group as well. So the first question is, what is future expectations for EMEA, specifically with a focus on Middle East and Africa? Is there any focus on increasingly targeting those regions as they're quickly growing, such as Asia?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if you remember the first slide when I showed like the weight of EMEA, the good thing about the Middle East is that it is a fragrance-driven market. So if you say to anyone who is in Dubai or who is anywhere in the Middle East or even in North Africa, you mentioned Carolina Herrera, Paco Rabanne brands, they know them, as opposed to what happens here. If you say to anyone, Paco Rabanne, no one knows them. So it's a very different strategy, because over there the portfolio is strong enough and it's about maintaining the lead in the market. So it's really about keeping a presence at a certain level, and there are new brands that with very strong fragrances and very let's say with like fragrances with character that can play in that market. So that's a large difference versus what happens in Asia, where the group is more of a challenger, right? They're established brands that are, very known and top 3 forever. And we're there, trying to make ourselves known with the new portfolio of brands and more focusing on skincare and makeup. But definitely the Middle East is a great opportunity for fragrance-driven brands. Yeah.
Now, the next question we have actually from the student is actually talking about the tools or software that you need for data analysis. Is there any way for the students to actually improve their analytical ability?
Yeah, so to be honest, the first thing and most useful thing that will ever be present and that will never fail you is Excel. So I'm a fan of, SQL or SQL, however you call it. I am a fan of Power BI. I love Tableau. They're all very useful. The truth is that your one thing that everyone can open in their computer that will never fail is Excel. So that's the first thing you need to dominate, and not even macros or anything, just like plain basic Excel pivot table. Then, of course, I am a very, very, very huge fan of Power BI, and I am starting to use it more and more now because it saves a lot of time, and because it helps people visualize things much quicker and better. It is true then that it will still need some upskilling for the people who use it, because you will always have one key person in the management that is just not going to go themselves and fetch the information. They're still going to want everything already done in their email. So I would say Power BI, learn for yourself. It's going to be useful anytime. There's tons of videos on YouTube, like you don't even need to go to a class or anything. It's about playing with it, and I think it's a hidden tool. So for those who have never heard of it, it's a good thing to have under your sleeve. to kind of show something very easy, but be, wow people. So I think that's the main purpose of it. And it really is time saving. So I would advise on that.
Angela, was there a required level of Chinese proficiency for your role?
No, it wasn't, thank God, because if it did, I was not going to be able to be there. I was very lucky, see, because Puig is a Spanish company. Their headquarters is in Barcelona. I am from Colombia, right? So my native language is Spanish, and I speak French because of my husband and because of ESSEC. So they have two headquarters, one in Barcelona in Spain and one in France, in Paris. So in my role, because I need to bridge the knowledge of the local markets to the headquarters teams, the advantage was to be able to explain in their language whatever is happening here. So that's why I was very lucky. But to be honest, I think there are certain parts of the role that would be much better for someone who does speak Chinese. And I think that is something that, even though may not be needed right now, in the future, brands in headquarters teams will definitely need to hire people who speak Chinese, because it's a whole different ballpark when you're trying to liaise with the teams in local market China. Like right now, the Puig China team, 100% of the people is Chinese speaking people. There's one Spanish girl, one. The rest of them are all Chinese. And we do feel that in any role that, in the future will come up in headquarters that has anything to do with Asia, it's best for them to have a Chinese speaking person. Yeah.
Well, this leads on to my next question, which is, for the consumer market insights team, what kind of candidates are you looking for social recruiting?
So right now, well, in my team, we're very small. It's me and my agencies. But the kind of people that we look for when we do look for them, it's first people who are open to, meeting agencies that have the business acumen to create a brief that is not about just getting as much data and becoming like a library of data and having all of this knowledge. It's about being able to have the knowledge and transform the knowledge into decision-making things, right? So we need people who are not scared to speak up, who are not scared to talk, to challenge, to say, this is not how I would do it. I would want you to change this, and not be afraid, because truth be told, it's quite hard to manage the relationship with the agencies. And I do respect the agencies so much. The clients were usually very hard, and every person who touches a project will want something different or tweak something, and you cannot be scared of saying, you need to tweak this, you need to work 1 extra hour on that, because it's not easy and it's an acquired skill set, I would say. So I think more than knowing the category or knowing the consumer or knowing the language is having that soft skill of being outspoken and being, not scared to come with crazy ideas. Maybe you will tell me, I think we should do a quali with this, not known agency, but they have a technology that works amazingly well. Why not? So it's all about, being quick, being creative, being data driven, but not being, again, the Excel geek behind the screen. It's really about communicating. So I think that's the most important thing.
Well, second last question that we have here is, to what extent does Puig give you creative freedom to adapt to local trends when the market in question represents less than 10% of their business? Yeah, so that's the challenge, right? Like when before COVID, you say, I need this for China. People are like, no need, whatever. Right now, and you saw it in the market data, the one market that was pushing that Asia positive number was China. So people are much more open to hear out, and the creativity is actually, again, it depends on the level the brand is versus their knowledge of the market. But the brands that are already very knowledgeable of the market and that have understood the level of localization they need to succeed, they're very open.
So when you see, and you can see, for example, for this year, Penhaligons, you see their Chinese New Year campaign, 100% of it was localized. They did not create these assets in headquarters. They let us do it because they trusted the team, and they trusted the fact that the team knew best what was needed for this Chinese specific moment of the calendar. So again, then you will have another brand that is still very scared, not very sure. So they will be like, oh no, but then it's about, again, showing with data, showing with facts. If we had this, this would have happened. Benchmarking, this is what the competition did. Look at how they performed. We could have done this. So again, data is always playing a role, and you're always providing a point of view, not about opinions, but about about strategic decisions based in data. So I think we are reaching a flexibility point that is very, very good, and we're hopeful that that 9% is not going to be 9% anymore.
Thank you, Angela. The last question we have is, other than China, what were some of your market penetration strategies when entering Singapore for Puig niche brands?
Okay, so Singapore is a very nice market, I would say, because it's a melting pot, right, of cultures. I'm sure you've lived it, even in the food, everywhere. You see it's a melting pot. So you have your Indian culture, but you have your Malay culture, but you have people from everywhere in the world living here. So the good thing about Singapore is that it's a test and learn place. So if you want to test something that is gonna, like if you want to know if it's gonna work for the Western mindset, or if you want to know if it's going to work for the Indian consumer, then you can push a certain brand and try to see what the reaction is. So if you see from our brand portfolio, most of our brands are in Singapore, which is an exception to the rest of the markets. If you go to Australia, for example, and when you see that market, Australia is all about prestige fragrance, and Puig is the #1 player in that market. Everyone knows Paco Rabanne is the #1 male fragrance in Australia. But when you say Christian Louboutin Beauty, it's not the same thing. So again, each market is going to have their own specificities, meaning that in Australia, I want to keep my prestige leadership, but I want to challenge with my niche portfolio. In Singapore, I want to test and learn with the different brands that I have available. What can I do in niche and how far can I push? What can I do in prestige and how far can I push without it becoming like a source of gray market for, the rest of the regions? In Malaysia, we know that it's a very fragrance-driven market. We have the biggest Sephora in the world, actually, existing in Kuala, in Malaysia. So there we have such a big space. We can try crazy things. So again, we can have a lot more exposure. Puig is more relevant in that market, so we can get better spaces, better pop-ups. So you will see that the strategy is really adapted to each and every market, depending on where we're good at and where we can challenge. Yeah.
Well, with that, we have come to the end of our Zoom session. I would first like to thank our speaker, Angela, for a wonderful presentation. Now, to our students, kindly unmute your mics and let us all give her a big round of applause to Angela to show our appreciation for her.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ian. So hopefully your term is going to be an amazing moment of your life. Enjoy, and talk to you later. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Angela. And to our
Bye.
students, great evening and have a good evening ahead. Thank you.